Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks FPL SC. In the final video of the 2021 NRL SuperCoach season, we are going through how I went over the season and some key lessons that I learned. A super crazy season. We saw a real shift in the game in terms of which positions we should actually be targeting. We saw a few key players who really, if you didn't own, you weren't going to be at the pointy end of the rankings. But overall, it was super fun. And I just want to say thank you as well to all of you guys out there for supporting the channel, growing the subscriber count up. Just starting this channel from scratch was really encouraging to see all your support and positivity throughout the season, and I will be back for the 2022 season, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. If you're only focused on the NRL SuperCoach content I'm going to produce, I will though get into more fantasy Premier League content throughout the off season as well, so if you are interested in that, definitely stay subscribed for that content. But yeah, just want to reiterate my thanks to all of you guys out there for the encouragement and support for the channel for the 2021 season. But let's get into the review of how we did. Long story short, we did okay. We finished the season with a 1,291 in round 25, and that got a season rank of 5,074, which really wasn't ideally where I wanted to end up. I wanted to actually be in the top 1% or ideally in the top 1,000. That was my goal coming into the season. We weren't able to meet that, and I think there are definitely a few key things that happened throughout the season that I can definitely recall upon that hopefully we can fix coming into the 2022 season. As you can see there, I've put a progression of my rank throughout the season. I actually started the season very well because I actually was able to nail those few players early on who did very well. You had Tedesco, Ryan Pappenhausen. I was able to get on Dave Fafita very early on as well. These were the guys that were able to produce the points well at the beginning of the season. I was also fortunate in my captaincy in terms of captaining Pappenhausen in that game where he scored 4 tries. I think that definitely was setting me up for success for the 2021 season. You can see there, after about round 9 or round 10, I was still hanging around that kind of top 1,000, 2,000 spot, but I can definitely see where it started to slip from rounds 10 to 11. Really, this is when Tom Trbojevic was just starting to go off, producing massive scores, and I didn't opt to go for him. I remember distinctly going for a Clint Gutherson instead, and while he did okay, he just was not producing what Tom was doing. I also wasn't able to get on Jerome Hughes when he started going on a really big scoring spree. And then around that whole bye period as well, I definitely was trying to plan for it, but I lost some key players come round 13, as many people did. But that saw my ranking plummet to around 5k come around 15. I was able to recoup that a little bit in the super trade round, able to bring in a few guys who started doing very well, like a Payne Haas, and so I was able to claw my way back inside that top 2,500. Again, there was key decisions I made with my trades that just did not work well, that we will definitely address in the key lessons learned. And obviously running out of trades, I think everyone copped the same issues with injuries, suspensions, and just no trades in general. It was hard to really improve your team to make a run for it at the back end of the season. And looking at the season as a whole, I think at times I was probably relying on finishing the season too well in terms of being more attacking with my trades. I think there probably were opportunities earlier in the season when I could have used those trades a bit more effectively, brought in the right player instead of opting to maybe hold a trade here and there or go for a more safe player. I should have probably just gone for more of a higher upside player. That was definitely the shift that we saw throughout the 2021 season. But overall, a 5k rank, it's okay, but it's not where I want it to be come the end of the season. But you know what, we'll take that, and we'll take the lessons learned, move that forward into the 2022 season. So I thought it'd be appropriate to do some kind of player ranking, and obviously Tom Trbojevic is going to be standing out on top there of the pyramid. You can see that little picture I've got there. I would say you can sum up the entire 2021 SuperCoach season with just that little graphic there. Captain Tom Trbojevic, who's now $1.26 million, scoring 229, a SuperCoach record. I think that's the definition of this season. He was just the ultimate SuperCoach weapon this season, and he also was performing obviously amazingly well in the NRL, and I would be completely shocked if he does not win the Dally M medal. Nathan Cleary was also very close to that top gun tier, averaging well over 100, the best halfback by far in SuperCoach. These two guys, if you didn't go with either of them, there was no way you were going to be winning SuperCoach or at least getting high in the rankings, because they were just going so much better than every other player in SuperCoach. In the tier below them, I've got a couple of guys, some who aren't surprising, but some definitely are. Isaiah Papali'i and Ruben Garrick definitely were the biggest surprise packets of the season, I'd have to say. Isaiah Papali'i went from a bench forward to the must-have front row forward in the game, averaging close to 80. And Ruben Garrick, a guy who almost was getting talked about potentially being dropped in like rounds 2 or 3. His goal kicking was helping him get to some really high scores. And there he goes, averaging around 80, I think, to end the season, getting scores well over 150 and 60. Obviously, a lot of that down to Tom Trbojevic, but again, an absolute complete 180 in his SuperCoach output from the beginning to the end of the season. Cody Walker was doing what we thought he was probably going to do coming into the 2021 season. Really in the back half of the season, I think, is when he kicked into gear And I think if you didn't jump on him as well, that was going to be really detrimental. And Dave Fifita, bit of the opposite. He actually was someone you had to have at the start of the season. We can't forget about those big 150 plus scores he was getting at the beginning of the season. Towards the end, he did peter out because he was being benched, but definitely was an integral piece of the 2021 SuperCoach season. Now, in the tier below are still guys who did super well. Your Brian To'o was just a lock in your center wing for the whole season. Jerome Hughes to prove to be probably the best backup to Nathan Cleary, although I have put Cherry Evans there as a notable shout out because he ended the season amazingly well. Nico Hines definitely is a shout out as probably one of the best cheapies of the entire season, coming in I think around 270k, and at one point he was around 900k, just doing amazing things for us in our center wing. I can't leave off Tedesco. It does seem like a down year, but he was still averaging 86, and what was a Roosters team that was depleted heavily, and I think he's definitely a serious factor we have to consider as well in 2022. And Adam Dwayhe, I thought, was a shining light in that pretty poor Tigers outfit and was just delivering SuperCoach points for fun, and it is a shame to see that he has got this long-term ACL injury. Obviously, there's a few other players I could have considered. Ryan Pappenhausen was an absolute essential player at the beginning of the season, but I thought this was a good kind of summary of the key players that we had to have at some point during the 2021 SuperCoach season. My first key lesson, I think, of the 2021 season was don't be afraid to swallow your pride and bring in the bandwagon that you may have been late on. And I think the three key examples I've got here was Zay Papali'i, Tom Trbojevic, and Nico Hines. Zay Papali'i, at the beginning of the season, we were seeing him post some really big scores in front row forward, 70s and 80s, even 100, 110 plus. And we were all thinking, surely he can't keep this up. This is unsustainable. And it got to the point where he was priced around 650, 700k, and people were still saying, look, he can't keep this up. There's too much money to pay. But at the end of the day, if you have a guy who's consistently outperforming every other front row forward by such a margin, I think you just have to swallow your pride and you just have to bring him in. At his peak, he had increased by 374k, and he was an absolute essential player in your front row forward. And so I think, yes, you may have missed out on all of that potential price rises, not getting him at around 450k, but at some point you just have to recognize, look, he's not a 410k player anymore. He's performing like a 600 plus k player. Just see it for what it is and just bring him in. Very similar story with myself personally as well for Tom Trbojevic. As I mentioned kind of earlier in the video, I didn't get him in just as he was starting to really hit top gear, and instead I opted for a Clint Gutherson, and we saw Tom Trbojevic, who was priced at 593k, which, to be honest, looking at this at the end of the season just seems absolutely crazy he was that cheap. I remember distinctly in my own head seeing him get these massive scores. He was going up to like 750, 800, 850, 900k, and I was just thinking, there's no way that he can keep this up. But at the end of the day, I was like, look, he's just damaging my rank too much. I'm just going to have to bring him in. I think I brought him in at 950k, and that basically stemmed the bleeding for my ranking. And at his peak, he increased in price 669k, which is just ludicrous to think of. And so he was definitely one of those guys where you just had to recognize this guy is just in another level to everyone else. He's posting 100 plus scores consistently. He ended the season with 143 average. Yes, I might have missed his big scores as he was first going on his run, but just swallowing the pride, realizing, look, I might have lost out on 300k, but at the end of the day, it's the points that matter. So I just need to bring him in. And that's what I ended up doing, and it definitely was helpful for my own consciousness as well. Nico Hines, I thought, was also a great example of this because you could have got him at 270k, and the biggest price change he actually had was 629k when he just became this absolute essential player in our center wings, goal kicking and playing out at fullback for the Melbourne Storm. Again, it's one of those guys where I think I brought him in about 550k. He'd already risen by about 300k at that point in time, and I think, yes, it's easy to see that he's already risen so much in price. Maybe he can't keep this up. But on the other side of the coin, you have to say, look, this guy is delivering the points. He's goal kicking for a team which is consistently scoring lots and lots of points. Yes, I might have lost out on that potential price rise, but I think I just need to get him in because, again, it's the points that matter. So this is definitely a key learning I'm going to see, hopefully in 2022. If I see a player who's doing really well, instead of questioning them saying, oh, I don't think they're going to keep this up, maybe just be a little bit less kind of frivolous about that and just look, at least bank some potential cash. But, if he isn't able to get the points any longer, that's okay. We can trade him out later, but you'd be better off getting them in and hoping that they continue to do what they have been already. So the next key lesson that I wanted to take out of the 2021 season was just to not focus on the buy rounds as much and not let it cloud your entire trade decisions. This is definitely something I was guilty of. I was always mentioning it in my videos as well. I will admit, I was saying, this guy plays round 13, this guy plays round 17. So it's definitely someone that you should be thinking about. For me, the biggest example of that was Cody Nikorima in round 17 at the last minute, I wanted that extra buy player just to see if they could jump me up in the rankings, and I traded Matt Burton to Cody Nikorima, and that turned to be one of the worst trade decisions of the season, because as soon as I traded him in, he got relegated to the bench, he lost his goal kicking, and as you can see from the time that I traded him in at round 17, he was just not performing to what he had already done up till that point in the season. And so that cost me a valuable trade. Matt Burton ended up being a very valuable player actually to have in your 17 for the run home. And this is also something I think people can relate to in the sense of, say, like a Sean Johnson. A good example of that is also the Viliami. Congrats to him as well for taking out the overall Supercoach standings. He went for Daly Cherry Evans instead of a round 17 option. He just wasn't convinced by Sean Johnson. And at the end of the day, he actually chose a player who he just probably thought was the best option, and definitely turned out to be the case. So he wasn't as concerned about, the buys. He was thinking, can I just bring in the guy who's got the potential to give me the most points for the rest of the season, and not so worry so much about one particular round where he wasn't playing. That's definitely something I'm going to try to think about next season. Apparently we are going back to a 3-round buy system next season, so we still definitely will have to pay attention to the buys, but I'm not going to try to let it dictate my entire trade decisions. My third key lesson for the season is trying to be a little bit more patient with my mid-range and cheapy options, and instead try to focus trades on the more higher upside, high averaging players. So I kind of boiled that down to less trades on your front row forward and trying to focus a little bit more on your center wings, your halves, and your fullbacks. The two best examples I can think of in my own personal team was Stefano Oitikamanu and Jason Saab. Jason Saab I traded out after around 4 or 5 rounds because he had he was averaging like 22 in the first 5 weeks. Manly were just not looking good. He had gone down in value up to that point already. I very easily could have just let him sit on my bench, not have to play him in my 17. And instead of just trading him out, I could have instead used that trade to make a bigger upgrade, because we saw Saab to end the season. He averaged 53 in the last 10 rounds, and he obviously posted some really, really big scores, notably that 162 against the Bulldogs when I think Manly put on 66. If I had held him and not been so worried about trying to get rid of a player who was already so low in value, he would have been a really, really handy center wing option to have, as added depth as well to end the season. And I think getting those scores of like 160 from that cheapy center you just held onto is definitely something that's going to help you rise in the ranks, in my opinion. This is something I even did last season as well, which I'm surprised why I didn't really stick a bit more solid with these kind of cheapy guys. Zach Lomax and Kurt Mann were two of the guys from last season who I had from day one, and they never got traded out of my team, and that did actually help me a lot towards the back end of the season because they were doing well enough. There was no real reason for me to trade them out, and they actually ended up doing pretty well. And I think Saab and Stefano kind of fall into that same category. Stefano, if we discuss him briefly, so the first 5 rounds he was doing okay, averaging around 48, and he had peaked in price. I think he was around 350 something K. My own mentality was really just looking at him as a cash cow and nothing really else. But instead, I probably could have looked at him and thought, look, this guy's averaging 40 to 45. He's not doing you any harm. Yes, you can trade him out and capitalize on his value. But, he looked pretty good in the eye test, and he's definitely something you easily could have held. And also playing in front row forward, the trade value probably wasn't there making, changes up in that position because the upside was just not there for front row forward. And he actually ended the season amazingly well, averaging close to 60 in the final 10 rounds. And he could have been a really, really handy piece to have for the rest of the season when there was injuries and suspensions happening everywhere. So that's definitely something I'm going to try to pay attention more to next season, is try to have a bit more faith or just hang on to these cheaper mid-range guys and not have to worry so much about trading them out, and instead use my trades on the high upside options instead. My final lesson that I wanted to address for the 2021 season was being able to adapt to the whole changing landscape of the game and the overall scoring. We obviously saw, due to the rules in the NRL, it translated to SuperCoach where we were just seeing blowout games, and as a result, those guys in the past who you normally would stick to, like a Ryan Madison, Angus Crichton, those second row forwards, instead it transitioned definitely to your high upside wingers, center wingers, and fullbacks. So Ruben Garrick, Alex Johnston. I distinctly remember Alex Johnston, someone in preseason me saying, look, he's an okay option, he's got high upside, but his base just isn't there. None of that really changed, to be honest, throughout the entire season. It was the manner of him scoring doubles and hat-tricks, with such regularity in that really red-hot Rabbitohs side. That was the reason why you really needed to get on him, because he was averaging around 100, and there was definitely that phase around the origin period where he was absolute gold, and if you didn't get on him, that really was going to hamper your rankings. And similar to Ruben Garrick as well, a goal-kicking winger who's on the end of a red-hot attack, that was the kind of player that we needed to fill our team, as opposed to, say, your second row forwards like a Ryan Madison and Crichton, who on a good day can give you those 100 plus scores, but are more likely to give you those 70 to 75s. Yes, there is a chance that these center wingers can give you like a 20 or 30, but the chances of them giving you like a big 150, that's something that they can offer that these second row forwards really can't do. So I think those who best adapted in terms of changing from these second row forwards to the center wingers, you can also throw in the halfbacks in there. We all know that fullbacks have really high upside as it is. I think that was the key as well in terms of having a really, really good ranking and doing really, really well overall in SuperCoach. And so I think this is going to be something that you can't really easily bring into next season in terms of preparing for it, because you have to let the season kind of unfold. We have to see if there's any changes in the NRL in terms of rules, if SuperCoach introduces any rules as well. But it's something I think that's useful to keep in mind, referring back to how this season played out and trying to use that to your best efforts in next season, where you say, if it seems like there's some trends starting to shift, can you potentially jump on it a little bit earlier than others? Obviously, it's easier said than done. That potentially, I think, will give you that success to be able to do really, really well in the overall rankings or in your head-to-head leagues. So I also wanted to give a shout out to the Man's League and our top 10 in the overall standings. We have Jason, Andrew, Samuel, James, Daniel, Ivan, Gabriel, Chris, James, and Shane. All were our top 10 in the group league and all had really amazing overall rankings. The lowest there was Shane at 633rd. Jason was 13th. He just missed out on getting one of those really nice looking KFC tracksuits. So unfortunate for him, but obviously a 13th ranking is an amazing SuperCoach season. So definitely congratulations to you, Jason. And I really hope to see all of you guys in next season's group as well. And I hope you all are able to replicate this, because this is an amazing finish, one that I'm definitely very jealous of. You can see my 5,000 ranking. I definitely would take a 633rd ranking, Shane. Don't be too sad that you're 10th in this list. But yeah, an amazing finish for all of you guys. So really, really proud of your achievements for this season. So I just wanted to end the video there. That's going to be the last video for the 2021 SuperCoach season. Again, a big thank you for all of you for subscribing, for all your positive comments as well. I have got some thoughts about what kind of content I might produce for 2022. If you have any ideas, definitely let me know in the comments below. I try to read all of your comments and respond to all of them as well. And yeah, just want to say thank you as well for all of the support. If you guys are interested in Fantasy Premier League, I will continue to make videos for that throughout the NRL offseason, so hopefully that does fill in your time just a little bit, but definitely letting you know that I will be back for the 2022 season as well. So thank you all so much. So if you all enjoyed the video, definitely do give it a like. Let me know in the comments below as well what your overall thoughts were on the 2022 season, and I'll see you all in the next video.